Japan's been in the middle of a pretty loud online debate recently about foreign workers and foreign residents. Depending on what you scroll past, you might think crime is out of control, foreigners are draining the system and the country's somehow on the verge of collapse. But once you take a step back and actually look at what's going on, a lot of noise starts to fall apart. So instead of repeating talking points, I want to look at what's real and what isn't, and how we even got to this point where people are calling this a foreign crisis. In May of 2024, something genuinely horrific happened in Kawaguchi City, just outside of Tokyo. A 22-year-old Kurdish man sexually assaulted a 14-year-old schoolgirl. Despite receiving a suspended sentence, he went on to assault another child, 12-year-old, only months later. In 2025, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. There's no ambiguity here. This is an awful, inexcusable crime. But almost immediately after, the conversation stopped being about the victims. Instead, the case was used as proof that foreigners are the problem in Japan. And that's where things start to go off the rails. Sexual assault is reported in Japan every single day. Tragically, a majority of those cases involve Japanese perpetrators. But when cases like this happen and the offender is foreign, it gets amplified far beyond the actual scale. One incident suddenly becomes a symbol, and once that happens, nuance disappears. So, what does the data actually say? In 2024, Japan recorded around 182,000 arrests. Roughly 900,000 of those, about 5%, involved non-Japanese nationals. The remaining 25% involved Japanese citizens. At the same time, foreign residents made up somewhere between 2.5 and 3% of the total population. Yes, that means foreign nationals are slightly overrepresented compared to their population share, but context matters. Even with that overrepresentation, foreigners still account for a very small fraction of overall crime in Japan. The idea that crime is being driven by foreigners just doesn't line up with reality, and crime isn't the only thing people point out. In 2025, NHK reported that over 1,400 foreign nationals in Saitama Prefecture were working illegally without proper legal status. Mainly construction and road work, working illegally is obviously a serious issue, but cases like this often frame foreigners as exploiting Japan, when they're actually highlighting something else. Japan's growing independence on foreign labour, especially in physical demanding jobs where fewer Japanese people want to do that. At the same time, there's real concerns about how foreigners are being treated by authorities. In 2024, a naturalized Japanese citizen of Pakistani origin along with others filed a lawsuit after being repeatedly stopped and questioned by police despite holding Japanese nationality. Cases like this raise an uncomfortable question about racial profiling and equal treatment under the law. Looking at these cases again, around 5.5% of penal code arrests in 2024 involved non-Japanese nationals. That's a lot lower than what online narratives suggest, and a significant portion of those cases weren't violent crimes at all. They were immigration or residency related violations. Even in the government, this distinction is acknowledged. In December of 2025, an LDP panel proposed things like faster access to interpreters during police investigations and better education on Japanese law for foreign residents. They also openly recognized the crime trends involving foreigners are not disproportionately worse than those involving Japanese citizens. Now, statistics are one thing, but the internet side of this conversation is where things get really strange. Earlier this week, I was scrolling through Twitter and came across a Japanese content creator cosplaying ICE, the US immigration agency. On its own, it might just seem like a joke or just engagement bait, but given the current climate, it was unsettling. What made it interesting wasn't just the cosplay itself, but the framing. This wasn't a foreign creator criticizing Japan. It was a Japanese creator leaning into a very American anti-immigration symbol and presenting it positively, seemingly for an international audience. That matters because it shows how the American culture wars bled into Japan. Ideas that don't really fit Japan's social reality get imported and repackaged, and then are treated as something that reflects something widespread. We've seen this before. During 2023 and 2024, anti-Kurdish sentiment exploded online. A handful of viral posts, some translated from Kurdish sources, falsely linked Kurdish residents in Japan to terrorism or violence. There was little evidence, almost no context, and yet the claim spread rapidly. Harassment, threats, and misinformation followed. At the same time, opinion polls showed that many people believe that foreign residents receive better treatment over Japanese citizens. That belief isn't backed up by policy or data, but perception has power. And once it takes hold, it ships fear, resentment, and hostility. That's why in 2025, more than 1,000 people gathered at Shinjuku Station to protest discrimination and misinformation, calling for a coexistence and fact-based discussion rather than fear-driven narratives. And then there's the topic that always comes up, birth rates. In 2024, about 686,000 babies were born to Japanese parents, the first time that number dropped below 700,000. That decline continued into 2025, with just over 339,000 births recorded in the first half of the year alone. By comparison, around 22,878 babies were born foreign national parents in 2024, accounting for roughly 3.2% of all births. From a statistical perspective, that's a record high. but in reality it's a very small slice of the total. For some people, that contrast feels unsettling. Japanese births are falling, foreign births are rising, and it creates an impression that Japan is somehow losing itself. But that interpretation doesn't hold up. Foreign births aren't replacing Japan's population. At most, they slightly soften the decline. The real issue is Japan's birth rate overall, something deeply tied to work culture, economic pressure, and policies that overwhelmingly favour old generations. Blaming foreign families for that ignores decades of structural problems. So what does this really mean? To me, this debate has turned into noise. Endless claims and counterclaims amplified by social media. Crimes like sexual assault are serious and deserve attention, but they make up such a small percentage of crime. When isolated cases are exaggerated and repeated enough, they start to feel like the norm, even when that data says otherwise. That distortion has real consequences. It's deepened the divide between Japanese citizens and foreign residents, leaving many feeling unfairly targeted and mistreated based on narratives rather than facts. As for the birth rate, that's a separate crisis entirely, one that can't be solved by pointing fingers at immigrants. There's more we can talk about, but these are the core issues worth focusing on. Personally, I don't think Japan has a foreign crisis. I think that phrase has been thrown around far too loosely, often as a way to avoid deeper, long-standing problems. But what do you think is actually driving divide in Japan? And what do you think could help close it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys again later next week. Adios.